In a moment, there's going to be 4 animations and 4 datum reference frames on the screen. I want you to take a second while they're up there and see if you can match the datum reference frame with its corresponding animation. Now this might be difficult for a lot of people because typically GD&T is taught in a 2-dimensional static environment, but it's very useful to be able to look at a 2D drawing, look at the symbology, and imagine how the 3D part would be allowed to deform and morph without being out of spec. So hopefully you've got your answers locked in, and let me know in the comments which ones you got right and which ones you got wrong at the end of the video. But now we're going to go through it together, and we're going to go from the least constrained datum reference frame to the most constrained datum reference frame. So starting off with our least constrained animation, which is of course our datumless position tolerance, what do we see? Well, the animation starts off with some distortion in the holes, which is of course exaggerated for the purposes of the video. But then we have some red crosshairs show up with a red circle. So what is this representing? Well, the red crosshairs in this case are the feature axis. And how does one define a feature axis? Well, in Y14.5, a feature axis is defined by the axis of the unrelated actual mating envelope. So these red circles are representative of the unrelated actual mating envelope of those features. Now, the unrelated actual mating envelope fades away, so we're left with the crosshairs. And then we have 2 blue circles show up, and these are representing the tolerance zone. And you'll notice as the holes sort of move around on the part, they're able to move left, right, up, down. They're able to twist. But those crosshairs, the feature axis always stays within those tolerance zones. And you might have noticed something else important about those tolerance zones is that while they twist and move with the holes, they are locked a specific distance apart, which is defined by a basic dimension. So those holes are able to kind of party around. And then now looking at the cross section, we get a better view of the unrelated actual mating envelope show up. So with the axis of the holes now represented, we get our blue lines, which in this case is again our tolerance zone. And you can see that they are at an angle relative to the face because again, this is not referencing the either top or bottom face of the part. And those holes are able to twist back and forth on that cross section. So moving on to the next step, the positional tolerance is now referencing datum feature A, which is the top face of this part. So let's see how the animation plays out. Once again, we are adding the distortion of the holes, and then the actual mating envelope, or the unrelated actual mating envelope shows up to develop the axis for the feature. And then once again, we can see the holes are able to move left, right, up, down, twist, as long as they stay within the tolerance zones, which again are locked together by a basic dimension distance. But now moving on to the second half of the animation, we're going to see that although they're able to move around left, right, up, down, and rotate, they're not able to twist relative to the part. And when I say that, I mean that the tolerance zones are not able to twist relative to the datum feature A face on the part. The holes could independently move within those tolerance zones, but the tolerance zones are locked at that angle, which in this case is perpendicular to that face. So moving on to animation number 3, we're going to be adding datum B in as a secondary datum in the datum reference frame. So let's go through this animation. Once again, we have our exaggerated hole distortion, and then our unrelated actual mating envelopes show up to develop the feature axis. And this is where things are going to change a little bit. So again, our tolerance zones show up, and then you can see that the tolerance zones move up and down, but they don't do any twisting or moving left and right. And that's because we've added this secondary datum into the datum reference frame. But we've locked in those tolerance zones relative to datum feature B, but why do we not see them maybe? So that explains why each tolerance zone is only moving up and down, but why don't we see maybe one tolerance zone move up while the other one moves down? And that's because while we've locked in the tolerance zones with our basic dimension to datum feature B, we still have to respect the basic dimension locking those two tolerance zones to each other. So that's why they have to move in plane up and down, and they can't move, one up, one down, or one up faster and one up slower. So they need to stay basically in plane with each other per the basic dimensions. And then moving on to the cross section, we once again see the unrelated actual mating envelope develop the axis, and those holes can twist as long as they stay within those tolerance zones, which are located perpendicular to datum feature A. And finally, we're going to look at our most constrained datum reference frame, which is when we add in datum feature C as a tertiary datum. And this is the simplest one to imagine. I think this is the one that most people can picture in their heads to a certain extent. And we'll look at the animation. We see our hole distortion, our unrelated actual mating envelope shows up to develop the feature axis. Our tolerance zones show up, which are now located relative to the datum feature A, datum feature B, and datum feature C. So they're fully constrained. They are no longer allowed to move. The tolerance zones, that is, are no longer allowed to move. But we see our features, both the holes are able to move around within the tolerance zones. And again, the cross section, we see something similar. The unrelated actual mating envelope shows up to develop the axis, and those features are able to twist within their fully constrained tolerance zones. So hopefully this was instructive for anyone who's either starting their GD&T journey or anyone who just doesn't have a good idea yet of how to visualize these two-dimensional concepts in 3D. But let me know which of those datum reference frames you got right, which ones you got wrong, and let me know if something was unclear, and maybe I can clarify it in the comments. Have a good one.